Friday, January 21st, we're reconvening the Citizens Redistricting meeting. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Aguirre?
Here.
Commissioner Baraba?
Here.
Commissioner Blanco?
Here.
Commissioner Dye?
Here.
Commissioner DeGiulio?
Here.
Commissioner Filkins-Weber? Commissioner Forbes?
Here.
Commissioner Galambos-Malloy?
Present.
Commissioner Antai?
Here.
Commissioner Parvenu?
Here.
Commissioner Rea?
Here.
Commissioner Ward? Commissioner Yao?
Present. Let's take care of some of the loose end from yesterday's, and then before I share with you what I think are the items that we have to take care of today. So at this point, could I ask our attorney to clarify some of the questions that we had asked him from yesterday?
Well, there are just two that I wanted to address right now. And, one is the choosing of the new commissioner. There's an outstanding question that was raised in public comment about whether we need a supermajority vote or a simple 9 vote. And I haven't had a chance to look at that. I will and get back to you on that. But there was another question yesterday about whether this regulation that talks about choosing a commissioner had any effect on what pool we use. The regulation, which is 60863, outlines a detailed process to be used if we can't choose from the subpool that we're looking at. So we just can look at that subpool, and there's no problem with the regulation. There was another question about whether Daimler-Alatorre Act applies to the commission. My answer is I'm not certain, but I don't think so. And let me explain. Initially, when it was brought up, I guess it was Commissioner Raya who looked it up, and the initial question was, are we a state agency? It it says that it applies to state agencies, and state agencies is defined in Section 11,000 of the Government Code, and we would be a state agency as defined in 11,000 of the Government Code because it includes commissions. The real key here is whether or not we're directly involved in furnishing information or providing services to the public, and there is a provision that for exemptions from this, if your primary mission does not involve responsibility for furnishing information or providing services, I would suggest that probably that would apply to us. That has nothing to do with whether you want to provide these services for other reasons. But let me just say that what I'm telling you is based on my reading of the Act. I'm not sure how it applies, and I can talk to Department of Personnel Administration lawyers and double check with that. But I don't think we have any immediate requirement that we have to fulfill. Typically, this applies and is meant for those agencies who give information to the public, particularly when you have a right such as the license involved or eligibility for services or something of that nature, where the services intended for people can be denied them or a license can be denied them simply because they can't understand what information they're supposed to provide or what their categories are, how they are eligible or how they are not. So I just wanted to pass that along to you, and I'll take a look at that supermajority requirement. Obviously, when you lose somebody from one party, then there is a greater chance, if somebody was so inclined, to create a stalemate if you need a supermajority. We may, we may not even get to that, but I'll take a look at it and let you know.
And by supermajority, just for clarification,
I'm
you mean
sorry.
nine votes then?
Yeah, well, not just 9 votes,
Three,
but
and
9
two.
votes, 3, 3,
and
3.
three.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's what, when I say supermajority, that's what I refer to. And thank you very much, because supermajority tends to often mean something more than 50%. In this case, we always have to have more than 50%, but when I refer to super, it's 3, 3, and 3.
So just to close the loop on the Dimely Aleatory, I didn't get a chance to do a lot of research. I just went and looked at the language more carefully, and it's possible that we are not covered. We're not. Our primary mission is not the type of agency that's mentioned in the reg. But what concerned me was that it does talk about, when it talks about furnishing of information or rendering of services, and then it gives examples, and it says providing public safety, it gives another series, and then it says, and engaging, and holding public hearings, and engaging in any other state program or activity.
Right.
And that just gave me pause.
No, and I read that this morning.
Yeah.
And then I moved to the end where you could get the exemption. And that's what gave me a little more confidence that we weren't covered. Because when I first read the passage you just read, I thought, okay.
Right.
But I think that, at least for now, the way I read the Act, even if we were a new agency providing service, we would not necessarily immediately have to do this. There's a long process for evaluating what the needs are and actually how many people you do come in contact with or deal with where there's a language issue. So I think for today and for the immediate future, we're okay, and we can look into that more. And as I said, you may choose to provide services. You may choose to provide interpreters or some kind of language help, depending on the particular meeting you may have. Clearly, there are some meetings when it wouldn't be applicable, and there'd be some meetings, hopefully, based on what you had said yesterday, that where you will be addressing an audience where there will be a language issue, and you'll want to have that so that people can participate and you can understand what their questions are.
Any questions? If not, the second item I'd like to do is Commissioner Weber wasn't present yesterday with us, but she was on the phone on the watching the video, and she's basically spent the whole day with us, and she emailed me a comment that she'd like to have read. So if I can ask Cynthia to read her email to the commission, that would be good.
Sure. This was regarding the possibility of having outreach subcommittees. She says, I would suggest the following. Given the number of commissioners interested in participation and one way to possibly avoid Bagley Keene, what if we considered breaking down the outreach subcommittee further to regional interests? For instance, I am the only Riverside County Commissioner and have lots of contacts in Southern California. For instance, Antai and I could be the one subcommittee for Inland Empire and San Diego outreach. Maybe Raya and Aguirre could be Ventura, North LA County, in the Valley. Maybe Peter, Maria, or Andre for Central LA. Given that I work in Orange County, I would also be available for a subcom with Mike for Orange County and the coast. Just one way we could break down the outreach subcommittee further to get more work done. Finally, one further thought for our public hearing. I agree with Cynthia that no outreach hearing should have a maximum limit for the number of commissioners who wish to attend. I know finances are an issue, but one of the reasons we were selected is because we acknowledge the geographic diversity of the state. Andre can certainly add a lot to the outreach efforts in Northern California, given his experience. Thank you for your consideration in my brief, unexpected absence.
Thank you. I had earlier made the assumption that Jody had written one email, but the fact is she wrote me a email and it's on a additional topic. So allow me at this point to read her second email to the commission. If I heard correctly, you wish to be advised the members interested in subcommittees. I am interested in legal and outreach. Please convey to the commission tomorrow in public hearing that I wish to express my strong suggestion that Riverside County be included as a meeting place for us in this pre-census outreach. Riverside County is the third fastest growing county in the U.S. I have placed a phone call to the Director of Community Relations at the University of California, Riverside, and he is thrilled with the position to host a meeting in March. I will likely receive details tomorrow or Monday. Please note that I have asked that they host the event entirely, provide details regarding everything that Claremont is providing, including microphones, 150 plus security dates in March. They would like to consider spring break time as there will be more flexibility for the rooms and parking as the campus is overcrowded. So I think we should accommodate them as well. Thank you. All right, any additional announcements or comments at this point?
One thing we might want to note is that the commission has not yet been provided the public comments. I think one of the things we wanted to hear from the public regarding different outreach strategies and suggestions, so we hope to have those by, I believe, midday today.
And once we receive it, we probably should take a break, maybe approximately 5-10 minutes, give us a chance to digest it and then take actions as appropriate. All right. All right, let me get to the right page and we can get going. For today, I think we mainly have three items or three agenda items to address. These are item number 3 on the agenda, commission governance. Items number 6 on the agenda, which is identify as SOS support effort, update and decision. And item number 7, require training. First of all, on item number 6, SOS would like to address that first thing after lunch. So we'll start at 1 o'clock, 1:30, depending what time we break, and take care of that particular item. So let me just go to item number 7. Item number 7 is the required training that this committee or commission is to receive. And I think the required training include things like awareness of the sexual harassment issues, the Voting Rights Act information, as well as perhaps including inviting any of the advocacy group to come before us to relay information that they have for us. So all these goes in under the category what I would call required training. Cynthia?
I just clarify, that's item 10. Item 7 is for our
Oh, is
staff.
it item 10? My mistake. Thank you. And then item number 3, the first thing I think we need to do is to select the next vice chairperson, because in planning for the agenda for the February meeting, somebody needs to work with Cynthia, who is going to be the chair for next week's meeting, in preparing for the February agenda that has to be posted by January 25th, if I'm not mistaken on the date. So we need to appoint that person so that we can satisfy that requirement. And then the big part of the item number 3 is we're going to hear from Executive Director Claypool on his plans, staffing plans. We probably need to have a little bit of discussion on the mechanics and as well as the authorization limits and so on. Also, yesterday, we, maybe ahead of yesterday, received an offer of the use of facility by the California legislators. We probably need to make a decision as to whether we should accept or thank them and reject the offer. Also, I think we need to, for each of the subcommittee, to decide what's going to be on the agenda. If we were to meet during our first meeting in February, again, the posting requirement for the agenda necessitate us to have all that information next week. Probably we'll be cutting it way too tight in coming up with that agenda for the posting. Last item I have on my list is the outreach subcommittee. Again, at this point in time, it appears that we have a lot of commissioners that are interested in being on that outreach subcommittee. So we need to discuss as to options of breaking it up into specific tasks and have multiple outreach committees, and or doing away with the subcommittee concept and make it a total commission effort. So these are the things that I have on my agenda for the balance of today. Anything I miss, Vice Chair Dai? Any comments, any additions that any of the commissioner want to add to the agenda?
I mentioned earlier this morning just if we were going to have the opportunity with today's agenda to see where our office space and where our staff facilities might be located and what's available for them.
Dan?
Certainly. We can go at any time. It's a very short walk from here. If the chairman will give us the time, we'll go take a look at it. Thank you.
We all have interest in taking a short walk over there?
I certainly do.
All right, we'll make time today to get over there.
Is it possible for us to adjourn around 4 o'clock and then take that time to walk over today? I will not be present next week, and I would like to see the office space, if possible, today at some point before we officially adjourn.
Thank you. You be the timekeeper, and you remind me to break at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Peter, I do have a question. Since the office address, I believe, is temporary, I think, until we finalize the final address for ourselves, would business cards be appropriate at this time for each of us?
Is that information correct? The address is temporary?
No, we have that facility for, I believe, for at least a year. So we can make cards with those addresses, whatever we need to do.
And it's rent-free.
And it's free. So, I would highly recommend that each of the commissioners have a business card stating our names, obviously, and the region that we're from.
I would just suggest that we're representing all of California, so I would avoid putting a region, but obviously our contact information.
I really agree with that. I mean, there were the guidelines and the regs, but at this point, we're doing this, we're not representing the region. I don't see myself as a regional representative.
All right, I think I sense a consensus that we all want business cards, and so that will be taken care of.
We're working on it. If I could just recap, so names, as commissioner, they asked whether you want to continue with the logo, that We Draw the Lines logo. It's done, it's free, it's ours. Do we want that on the cards? Okay. And then telephone numbers,
Should have a office number as well as whatever number we want to have on our card.
Okay, so we'll have both the office number for over there and the card number. The only address I assume you would want would be that address on your cards. And then we can, as things come in, we'll make sure that you get them. Email addresses? Do you want that?
Official ones.
Do you want the CRC address? Okay. And
And website.
CRC
And the website as well.
and the website.
Yep.
Is that it?
And individually, we'll contact you if we want our cell phone number on there, okay?
Right. What I'm going to do is make sure that we can get all that on there. As soon as we have exactly the way it's going to lay out, then Ann and I will contact you or someone and you can add that in, and then we'll get it off the printers.
Thank you.
So you mean the phone number that we did on our little contact list?
Negative.
Is that the phone number?
They'll check to see which phone number you
Okay.
want.
'Cause,
Yeah, we're not going to put any other number but the office number, except the number that you tell us once we submit the mock-up to you.
Okay.
All right. Any additional thought before we go directly into the agenda topic? All right. Item number 10 is a pretty straightforward item. Let's see if we can knock that out quickly. The required training.
As I understood it from yesterday's meeting, you want the same training for the next 6 that the first 8 received. And so is that,
No. Sometime in December, I think we received a memo suggesting that each and every commissioners shall receive the required training for state employees or state commissioners. And there was a list of at least 2 or 3 training courses that we are
Required to take.
okay.
it was suggested that we're required to receive, and I want to make sure that we complete that requirement.
And that memo was authored, I assume, by the Bureau.
Yeah.
My understanding was that the ethics training is available online. I have not seen the link myself, so I don't know a lot about it, and that there was some suggestion regarding who should be the facilitator for the sexual harassment training. I think the BSA has someone that they've worked with before, so we're thinking that could be scheduled for one of our future commission meetings.
Okay, we can give that training either through the Bureau and contact them, or it can be done through the Secretary of State's office. It will probably be more quicker to do it through the Secretary of State's office, because I know that at least for the sexual harassment individual that provides that training at the Bureau, that person's on contract with them, and we would have to try to arrange it. So I would suggest that we arrange it through the Secretary of State's office, because just out of expedience.
At least my thought is to try to get that out of the way as soon as possible. If we can make that happen next week, let's see,
Okay.
squeeze that in. If not, then during the February meeting, so I can check off that box and not have to worry about it anymore.
We're just conferring as to agendizing the training.
I think training is on the
Yeah.
agenda. It's
It
just
is
a matter
on
of
the
agenda.
scheduling it. Yeah.
All right, we'll look into it.
All right. And the other training topic I thought maybe we need to spend a few minutes on is, as a commission, we can invite any and any group to come in to either educate us or inform us on topic related to the redistricting. I think there exists a lot of information with regard to scholar studies, options, alternatives, as well as analysis on the general topic of redistricting. And I want to suggest that we identified all those advocacy groups or good government groups, and pick those that we want to receive that input and schedule that again as soon as possible. So, any particular thoughts on that topic, or any discussion as to how we should decide as to what we want to hear, what we do not want to hear?
I would just mention that we've already received an offer to help in any way they can from several nonpartisan 501c3 organizations, including the NAACP, the Asia Pacific American Legal Center, and MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, to do that kind of training about the Voting Rights Act, which I think is important that we get a lot of that thinking early on, since we all agree we need to deal with the preclearance issue first.
I also suspect that there are probably many professors out there that are teaching redistricting as a topic that may be interested in educating this particular commission. So, again, what process do you think we should follow in terms of deciding and scheduling these training sessions?
Is it possible to somehow set up a system where we could actually have a request for those individuals or organizations that would like to provide a training, and not just a request, but for them to actually draw up or to at least give us a summary of what the kind of training they would like? It just seems to be that we might be able to identify some specific training, but at the same time, there's probably groups and individuals that would like to speak, but it would be nice, other than just a general invitation, for them to tell us what they'd like to talk about. Then we can make a better decision as to whether or not that fits within our agenda as well.
Having missed some of the previous discussions, have we discussed what we think we need training on?
No.
Not specifically. We just know that we think some training would be good, but we haven't sort of point by point decided what we, if not, I suggest we do that at some point. Right, and since we're on that item, maybe we could talk about what we want, because it may be different. It may not just be Voting Rights Act or Section 5. There may be other.
This is a good time to dive into that topic. Any thought on what training do we think we need?
I don't know if we individually will be using Maptitude, but I have some general familiarity with Maptitude, but I think there's a lot of technical skills and prowess that we're going to be at least familiar with, especially working with our consultants. So I would feel comfortable with each and every one of us as commissioners gaining a greater familiarity with that advanced software program.
Commissioner Parvenu, I just want to clarify that we have not made a decision on what software we're going to use, but appropriate training for whatever software we choose would be appropriate.
Yes, I stand corrected. Thank you.
I know, I think I would like to personally have some training on the concept of what are communities of interest for the purposes of redistricting. I mean, we talk about we want to, identify communities of interest, but, you can come up with an endless number of communities of interest depending on being bridge players or something. I mean, it could be anything. But I'm sure or I'm not sure, but I think that it probably is things that have been used in other cases of defining what are communities of interest for purposes of drawing new lines. So if we could have either stuff to read upon that or have a presentation on that, it would be helpful for me
as we go out and do that early before we actually go out and do our outreach.
In December, we received a very basic overview of the Voting Rights Act, but I would really like to have a more in-depth review for all the commission. Granted, we'll probably have some legal counsel that will be kind of the front line on that, but I think we all need to have a basic framework for that.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest we might want to review what's on the statewide database. There's several reports that are focused exactly on what we're talking about, and the state of California has already paid for a lot of that. So it might be that we could just review what's already been studied and get some participation from the statewide database to provide that to us, since they not only have written about it, but they've actually applied it. And so we can get through that in a much faster manner.
When there was initial training on the Voting Rights Act in, I guess, December, did they go through sort of a mock example of how you balance all these different things, like a case study?
Not in great detail, but on their website, there's a lot of discussion.
I
For
believe
example,
the
whole issue
presentation
of-
is still available on the We Draw the Line website. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. I've looked at it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I asked that is that I think that where this will get complicated is we can say we think we understand communities of interest, and I agree that that's a key thing for us to figure out very soon. And unfortunately, there's a lot of different ways that people interpret it. But we should. But the one of the major things that comes up in these situations is how do you balance the different criteria that Prop 11 sets out? We're going to come to a point where we're going to say, if we follow if we prioritize the Voting Rights Act like the regulations require us to, we may be doing something that seems contrary to a community of interest. And I think those will be the very complicated and probably where we need. And so I think nobody can tell us what to do about that. That's going to be us figuring it out. But it would be good to sort of get an example of a situation where the different criteria that we're working with that are laid out for us legally sort of can come into play, and how somebody would, maybe two different ways that somebody would do that, it's just one thought, because I think it's almost like a hands-on training exercise.
Along those lines, as an example, the issue of nesting, there's a detailed report about the complexities of nesting and how it conflicts with other requirements that we would be able to address. So it just seems to me that there's been a lot of work done on thinking about this that we should try to take advantage of, rather than starting all over from scratch.
Yeah,
And also, I was going to mention too that this weekend, actually starting today, there's the National Redistricting Seminar. It's in Maryland, and I had mentioned it to our legal counsel over at the BSA, who advised on the side of caution to wait until we all got together and identified training mechanisms. I see that some of the people who have been resources to us, for example, Justin Levitt, are on the agenda, but there's a series of different workshops, some of which are, for example, hands-on redistricting exercises. So I wonder if it would be possible to see if there are some resources available through the folks putting on this conference that we could access.
And I know that the statewide database did a training for the different community organizations that are going to be offering assistance, so that citizens can participate at these 6 sites that that have been set up. And I know that they actually did they went through a legal presentation, and then they put people in front of a computer with a map and walked them through it. So we have some local people that that also trained us initially that could do that if we thought that was a helpful exercise.
Yeah, following along with this legality aspect to the process, there are, as I understand it, there's legal challenges to every redistricting plan, and as some folks stated to us at a previous time, that some folks are already organizing to challenge no matter what we do. So perhaps some training or some information on what some of the potential issues might be that we might be challenged in court, just so that we can anticipate some of those things, and as we carry on the work of the commission, that we certainly have those red flags so we can try to accommodate for those potential challenges.
And I think if we do that, we have to be very careful who we select to do the training for us.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a very, people view these cases very differently. and we are operating in a new legal environment, which is the confines of Prop 11. And so that's untested in some ways. So I agree with you. I just think we need to make a very careful decision about who we would have who would walk us through some of the possible, landmine.
With some of these things that we've mentioned, I could foresee staff really helping us. Once we get a legal counsel, that legal counsel could either give us the presentation or do the research as to someone that would fall in those categories that Commissioner Blanco was mentioning. We also may have a legal counsel that has expertise in VRA, or we'll have another one that will have expertise in VRA. So I'm assuming that individual will also be able to give us the legal definition of communities of interest, in addition to the issues that we'll be facing with Section 5. So it seems like some of these issues it's very good for us to identify them, but we might be able, as Vince was saying too, to have staff help us identify those places and those individuals and those organizations that could provide this training or bring it to our attention, as opposed to spending the time to reinvent the wheel or the resources.
Just a point of clarification for the public. When we refer to VRA, that's the Voting Rights Act. That's how we refer to it. Just want to make sure people understood what we were talking about.
And I'd also mention just real fast that if we do have staff instigated, it might also save us from some of those issues that we would have of having to make a decision between different interest groups that would like to present what their take, I don't say their take, but their perspective on some of these issues would be.
Yeah.
And I think that if we're going to have a consultant come in and give us some training in this issue, which I think is a great idea, I would like to see a lot more case studies, because I think what we're looking at is the devil in the details, and this is where it's going to make a difference on how we perceive what are right plans and appropriate plans.
Yeah, I agree. We did actually have some really basic case studies that Professor Levitt presented to us, not in California, to show us, in fact, that compliance with the Voting Rights Act would result in very strange-looking districts that actually might look gerrymandered. So, and the nice thing about Prop 11 is it's very clear about the precedents of the various legal principles that we have to apply. But where I think it stopped short was actually there was a preliminary attempt at defining communities of interest in Prop 20, I believe, that probably would bear more discussion by the commission to see what we decide is a community of interest that probably doesn't include bridge players. But I think that definition in Prop 20 we're going to have to discuss some more to see if we want to add more clarity around that. I'm not sure that we can just get a training on that. That is where people disagree. So I think that's something where we're going to have to apply judgment on that.
I want to acknowledge that this commission does not have any bias against bridge players.
Only if they teach me.
All right, I jotted down roughly 9 or 10 different thoughts that you put together. May I suggest as a perhaps direction to staff is post these topics, 9 or 10 topics, on our website, solicit potential groups, individuals that may be interested in addressing this commission, and task the subcommittee that has the responsibility of public information, and I believe that subcommittee has also the charter of education, and I propose that we include the education charter to include educating of the commissioners. So this is my thought and thinking out loud. Should we try to hold, let's say, 2 training sessions each week in order to cover these roughly 10 topics over the next 5 weeks that we meet, as a way to get these kind of information as soon as possible? Is that something that you would, as a general set of guideline understanding, should we make that a direction?
I actually would suggest we really need to front-load the training so that we can be effective and are informed as we're making other decisions. So I don't think spreading it out is actually a good idea. I think we should try to get a lot of this training up front, and it will obviously depend on who responds and some choices around consultants as well. My other thought is that it's not just a public information committee. I would hope that the legal subcommittee would think about legal training. I would hope that the technical committee would be thinking about training on the software and some of these. I think actually a lot of these issues would fall under the technical committee. So I would suggest that training be an agenda item for all the committees.
Again, the subcommittees are all advisory groups. The decision will always come back to this overall committee for final approval. So instead of, in general, trying to squeeze 2 a week, shall we try for 3 a week so we can get it done in about 3 weeks?
I think the only one, even though I think we're all kind of antsy to try the software, I know I am, that's actually one that could be delayed because we're not going to be doing that right away. So if we wanted to not squeeze as much in, we could postpone the software training.
I concur. One suggestion, but I agree.
So any additional thought in terms of how what general guideline we want to give to this subcommittee and the process of deciding how we're going to receive the training?
Just one other thing, thinking ahead that we'll probably be overwhelmed with a quote-unquote oral presentation, so that if we could get the materials at least a week ahead of time of the training, so we can start to digest the information, and it'll be a much more effective way of doing it. So.
Yeah, actually, being an educator, I would suggest that we get homework so that we're prepared, and then we can see a presentation and ask questions.
All right, so in general, we're asking staff to post this request solicitation on the We Draw the Line website, and ask any group or individual that has interest in helping us with this training activity on the 9 or 10 topics that we have discussed. Bring that information to the subcommittee, and they'll organize and the presentation to this entire commission for final approval. Is that the general approach we want to take?
I do think we talked about front-loading. I think that we should try and prioritize them in terms of which are those that will be most useful for our public meetings, outreach meetings, which will
Okay,
start sooner.
that, again, will be a
That needs to be
direction to the subcommittee.
the front end.
Right.
I'd like to also request the email listserv of all the interested parties that we've been using to blast information, if we could do that in addition to post on the website.
Thank you.
And I just want to clarify that the training will be accessible to the general public with public comment as we proceeded before with the training of the first 8. Or is it something we want to have done in closed session? Or
No,
We
these
can't
are
do it in
open
closed
session
session.
training.
Must have it?
Yes.
Okay, that's,
Yes.
no, I'm in agreement. I
All
just
right.
wanted to make sure.
Any questions from staff? Mr. Claypool?
Yes, first of all, on the 9 or 10 items, we're going to need to coordinate that with your list.
Yeah, I only got 5, so I got 5.
And I had 5 or 6, but that's, but as long as we,
All right, let's make sure that it's not a Peter Yao list. I have down community of interest, software, VRA, statewide database, example of VRA compromises, nesting, conferences, some of the specifically addressing the one that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now, perhaps. Legal challenges, case study, these are the notes that I took down.
So I think the legal challenges and,
Some of these can obviously
of these
be
are
combined, but in general, that's
Okay.
yeah.
so the number 9 is not at all important. It's just being able to cover the areas.
What we'd like to do is we'll reflect them back to you, just to double check. And I see just 2 categories, general categories. One is what I would call subject matter training. So we're talking the Voting Rights Act, software, nuts and bolts of redistricting,
Right.
some of which, there's been some initial training for the first 8, but we need more in-depth training, certainly on those. And then the training that is state government training, the stuff that you have to have, sexual harassment,
Right.
perhaps Public Records
Right.
Act, yada, yada, yada. And we'll try and Dan will, because I know you're going to pick a council soon. No. We'll try and reflect those back to you and give you some feedback about availability
Yeah.
of people to do the training, which then you can use to kind of decide how you want to schedule it. And if we keep training as a standard agenda item, then we're okay. We don't have to agendize each individual speaker.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because you're just not going to know it, I think.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
I mean, within that 14 days.
Yeah.
In general, shall we limit each of the presentation to half an hour, 45 minutes?
I don't think we should put a limitation on it. I mean, if we need an in-depth training, we can't ask them to do it in half an hour.
Peter, I would just, if we were back in December or even November, I'd be setting out as broad a range of possibilities as possible, but it's February. And I think we ought to just look at the closest resources that are available right now and just narrow in on those and get them in here. Because we don't have a lot of time. So, and there's some resources that are available right now that
All
we
right,
can bring in.
let's task the chair for the next meeting and the vice chair for the next meeting to pick the most appropriate one and the most available one and start the training next week, if at all possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the required state training, it might make sense for us to take advantage of this while we're still meeting in Sacramento and get that out of the way.
Okay, I think we have enough guidance on this topic to proceed. All right, if there are no further questions, then we'll go on to the another easy one that we can knock off the list. Yes.
Comment
Peter,
from staff.
before we move to the next item, could I suggest a 10-minute break? We have a set of lights that are on in the parking lot. They belong to one of the commissioners, and so if we could break just to take care of that, and then we can come back.
All right, we will reconvene at 10:30, plus or minus a couple minutes. All right, thank you very much.
The statewide database.